Hey there, everybody. Singers ask me all the time, how do I become a good singer? And one of those ways, those first steps you have to take is you have to figure out your vocal type and your vocal range. And a lot of people are like, what's that? And I get it. I don't even quite understand all of it as well. I'm a professional singer, so don't feel bad. I thought, who do I know that I could call to really explain this perfectly? And I thought, I know just the guy. He has a zillion followers on YouTube. He is trusted. He is loved. He is the vocal expert, Matt Ramsey. Matt, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, what up, Christine? Thank you so much for having me. I mean, let's be honest, every singer wants to know his or her voice type. And it's usually for one of two reasons, or both. The first reason is typically they want to know their vocal range, or how low or how high they can sing. And number two, they want to know what they can expect out of their voice. And if they know what their voice type or their vocal classification is, then they usually have a better idea about what they can expect out of it.
So how would we describe what a vocal type is? Are there maybe famous singers that a lot of the viewers that are watching and a lot of the listeners would go, okay, this famous person is a soprano or this famous person is a baritone? Is there anybody like that you could compare to help everybody understand a little bit better?
First of all, there are 6 main voice types. There are lots of subclassifications. We're not going to talk about those right now. But for this video right now, I just wanted to talk about the main 3 voice types, is 3 for men and 3 for women. From the lowest, starting with the males, we have the bass, the baritone, and the tenor. And for ladies, from lowest to highest, we have the alto, the mezzo-soprano, also called mezzo, and the soprano voice type. For bass, think Johnny Cash. For baritone, think David Bowie. For tenor, think Bruno Mars or Sam Smith. And for the ladies, for an alto, think of Annie Lennox or Adele. For a mezzo, you could think of Lady Gaga. And for a soprano, you can think of Ariana Grande or Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston. There's lots of them.
Okay, that makes sense. So what would be the first step in figuring out what someone's vocal classification is?
The first place to get started in finding your voice type or your vocal classification is understanding your vocal range. Now, your vocal range is just the distance from the lowest note to the highest note that you can sing. Now, I have to warn you, this is where most of my students go off the deep end. They think if they know their vocal range, then they know their voice type for sure. But vocal range is only one indicator of a potential voice type. Let me give you a bad example. I see this on YouTube all the time. I have singers who say, oh my gosh, I can sing from an E1 all the way up to an E7, so I must be just some sort of a crazy voice type. Well, let me ask you a question. How much of those notes sound good? Probably not all of them, right? There's probably a particular range of those notes that sounds better than others. And that's a far better indicator of what your actual voice type is than just how absolutely low and how absolutely high you can sing. But it's really, really easy to find your vocal range. And in fact, I've got an amazing tool that I've created. It's totally free. Just go to rangefinder.ramseyvoice.com and you can find your vocal range in only 6 seconds. You just enable the mics, you sing your lowest note and your highest note.
Now that is very, very cool. I love the fact that there's a tool to do this. I would have never thought that that's possible. Technology is crazy, right? So guys, if you're watching this, then you need to go to rangefinder.ramseyvoice.com. That's rangefinder.ramseyvoice.com for you to find your vocal range. So what's next, Matt?
As I said before, finding your voice type or your vocal classification is so much more than just your vocal range. I want to introduce one of my absolute favorite indicators of vocal classifications, which is the vocal weight of a singer. Now, the vocal weight of a singer is how heavy or light a specific voice is. For an example of a heavy voice, you can think of a Johnny Cash. It's super heavy, and I can even barely make it sound, deep and rumbly like Johnny can because I have such a high tenor voice. So my voice is a lot brighter. It's a lot lighter in terms of the sound of it. For another example, think of the singer Nina Simone, who's an alto. She's got that really, really buzzy, rumbly, low end to her voice. She's got birds flying high, you know how I feel. Like, it almost sounds like I could imitate her and be almost on the same level. And that is, to some degree, kind of true. You could even compare Nina Simone's voice to another soul singer tenor like Sam Cooke, and you would see that their voices are almost aligned in some ways because they have about the same amount of vocal weight. For the other example, think of a really, really light vocal weight. For example, you can think of Sam Smith. Now I've got you in my sights. It's just very airy. It's very light. It's quite breathy. And in general, it's just very, very thin. You can also think the same thing of Ariana Grande, who has that very, very, very light and thin voice up there. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not powerful. It just means that, you could not imagine, Lady Gaga or Annie Lennox singing the same thing as Ariana Grande. Or for another example, you can't imagine Johnny Cash singing a Sam Smith tune. They would just sound totally different. They might be able to hit some of the same notes, but the vocal weight would sound totally different.
That's all super awesome information. Thank you. I'm even learning like so much right now, so thank you. And you mentioned to me that there is one more thing besides figuring out your vocal range and your vocal weight. Please share with everyone what that is.
Once you know your vocal range and your vocal weight, you're pretty well on your way to knowing your voice type. However, there's one other area that I really want to make sure that you understand so you can really find your voice type for sure. And that's what we call Tssatura. Now, Tssatura is a very kind of subjective thing, but Tssatura in general is basically a fancy word that just means the comfortable range of notes in your voice. For instance, I'm a higher tenor, and so I can sing from a C3 up to around a G5. However, not all of those notes sound amazing. Now, that's a pretty good range, but you would notice that my voice doesn't sound nearly as good on that low note, as it does when I start a little bit higher, like, it just sounds a lot freer, a lot cleaner. The same thing is true as of this G5 up here. I can sing that, I can sing that note, but does it sound great? No. So really, I have a Tssatura, or more of a comfortable range from around an E3 up to around a C5. So once you know those two different ranges, first, the complete vocal range that you can sing, but also, more importantly, the comfortable range of notes that you can sing, you can start to make a pretty good guess about where your voice type really is. So let's bring it all together now. Basses will have the lowest vocal range, they'll have the heaviest vocal weight, and they'll also have a lower tessitura, usually from around an E2 up to an E4. Baritones also have a pretty good range, but again, it's a little bit lower than the tenors, and it's a little bit higher than the basses. And they have a good amount of vocal weight, but it's not nearly as thin as a tenor sound or nearly as rumbly and gravelly as a bass sound. And a baritone will usually have a tessitura, or a comfortable vocal range, from around an A2 up to an A4. And that brings us to tenors. And tenors are going to have the highest vocal range of the males, and they're going to have that thinner vocal weight. Doesn't mean that it's not powerful. Freddie Mercury is a fantastic tenor. However, at the same time, he doesn't sound the same way as like Johnny Cash or Bing Crosby would sound. And tenors have a comfortable vocal range, or a tessitura, usually from around a C3 up to a C5. Now for the ladies. Okay, so the altos are going to be the lowest female voice type. They're going to have the lowest vocal range. They're going to have a great amount of vocal weight. They might even sound like they're men sometimes if they're singing. You might mistake them for like a higher tenor sound as they sing. And they typically have a vocal range, or a comfortable vocal range in tessitura, from around an F3 up to an F5. Next up is the mezzo-soprano. Mezzo-sopranos are, again, going to have a beautiful vocal range that's kind of in the middle. It's not as high as the soprano voice. It's not as low as the alto voice. Mezzos are kind of right in the middle, and they usually have a great amount of vocal weight, which makes it sound really, really exciting. You can think of Lady Gaga and just how powerful and kind of like, that kind of rattly and buzzy kind of sound that she has in her voice. That's a good amount of vocal weight right there. And mezzo-sopranos will usually have a range from around an A3 up to an A5. And that brings us to sopranos. And sopranos are going to have the highest vocal range of the females. They're going to have the thinnest vocal weight. Think Ariana Grande, think Mariah Carey when they're singing throughout their range. And sopranos typically have a comfortable tessitura or a comfortable vocal range from a C4 up to a C6. Now, let's put all of our vocal coach hats on for a second. And I thought it would be fun if we take your voice, Christina, and we actually analyze it and figure out what voice type you are. From my understanding, you haven't had a whole lot of vocal training before, and so this might be a new thing for you.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I don't even really know my vocal range, so I'm ready for this. Tell me what it is.
Okay, so I had Christine test out her vocal range using my rangefinder app, and we found that her lowest note was a C3, and the highest note that she could sing was up to an E6. So C3 all the way up to E6. This is a fantastic range. That's 3 octaves and a major third on top of it. Before you go and say, oh my gosh, Christine has an amazing vocal range, she must be a super high soprano, let's remember the other things that we need to look at, which are going to be her vocal weight and also the tessitura, the comfortable range of notes that she can sing in. Okay, so I'm just going to play a short clip of Christine singing a cover of Heartless. I know that this has a lower vocal range to it. It also has some higher notes in it. So I thought that this would probably be a good example for us to listen to so we can kind of hear what her voice sounds like and what kind of vocal weight we're looking at.
In the night, I hear them talk. Coldest story ever told. Somewhere far along the road, he lost his soul to a woman so heartless.
So listen to that part right there. Can you tell how buzzy and how resonant her voice is on those lower notes? This is a great indication to me that Christine has a lot of vocal weight. But that's not the entire picture yet, because we also want to think about her comfortable range of voice as well. So when thinking about Christine's tessitura, I listened to a bunch of Christine's music, and what I noticed is that a lot of her music, she tends to kind of stay in a certain area, usually from around an E3 up to around maybe an A4. Sometimes she goes a little bit higher than that, up to the C, D, E, etc. However, most of the time, if you looked at kind of like the average number of notes that she sings in which places, I noticed that they kind of hang out in this E3 to an A4 range, which is a little bit on the lower side. So let's put all of this together. Go ahead and put your vocal coach hats on for a second and think, okay, what is Christine? So she's got a fantastic range. That's awesome. But she also has a really heavy vocal weight. And also her tessitura is a little bit lower. Does that sound like anyone that you know? Remember, Christine's a female, so we're going to be thinking about altos, mezzos, and sopranos. So what did you come up with? Okay, so before we do our magical reveal, again, we're thinking about the lowest to the highest note, the vocal range, which again, you can find easily. Go to rangefinder.ramseyvoice.com to find yours for free in just 6 seconds. We're also thinking about the vocal weight, how light or heavy the voice is. We're also thinking about the tessitura, the place where Christine spends most of her time as a singer. Now, what did you guys come up with? Well, me personally, I am of the opinion that Christine is an alto. Maybe you could argue that she's a lower mezzo, just based on, some of the vocal weight. It's not quite as heavy as some of the other altos out there. But definitely, I would say that this is the place where she chooses to kind of live her life as a singer. Now, I should just go on record and say that all of these vocal classifications are totally subjective. They were created in order to assign opera roles to classical singers way back in the day. However, it can still be really helpful to understand more about your voice type so that one, you know how low and how high you can sing, but also what you can expect from your voice.
I just want to thank you, Matt. This has been really informative to everyone that's watching. That's so cool that you have this tool where we can figure out our vocal range. Thank you for analyzing mine. Now I know that I'm an alto, and this is really, really cool. So everybody that's watching, make sure to visit Matt's site one more time, rangefinder.ramseyvoice.com.
Christine, thank you so much for having me. It was super fun. I hope all of you guys feel confident that you found your voice type. Go ahead and just leave a comment at the bottom saying what voice type you are, what vocal range that you found on my website, and if you have any questions about this video.
Thanks again, Matt. See you next time.